What's up, everybody? Nick back here with you from Project Central, and today we're in the home shop, but we're talking about land stuff. So recently my wife and I purchased a little over 2 acres here in central Oklahoma that eventually we're going to build on, but right now we are in the process of clearing a whole bunch of trees off the land. We've got a pretty invasive species here called eastern red cedar, and I'm trying to kill them all off my 2 acres. So when we bought the land, we knew there was going to be some tree clearing. Today we're going to talk about, should you burn the brush or should you chip the brush? Let's get into it. For this video, it's going to be a pretty high-level overview and just some of my thoughts on what's better for certain situations. So to start with, burning the trees and the brush and whatever you're trying to clear off your land. Like I said, in our case, it's mostly 99% eastern red cedar. So the first reason you should burn everything is faster, especially trees that will burn green. You know, not everything has to be seasoned to burn. Obviously, there's forest fires and stuff that burn green wood once it gets hot. So if you can get a hot enough fire going, you can burn those trees pretty green. Not only can it be fast, but it can also be pretty affordable. Having a couple brush piles going and getting the proper permits. Usually a burning permit, at least in my area, is free, if not 10 or 20 bucks. So it's usually pretty affordable to burn all that brush, as long as the weather's permitting. But we'll talk about that in here in a little bit. The next upside for burning your brush is that it doesn't leave anything left over. The fire consumes everything. Stumps, leaves, whatever you throw into that fire, it's all going to disappear. So if you're trying to really clean up a big area fast and you don't want anything left over, fire is the way to go. Also, one of my personal favorite reasons is campfires just smell good. Burning wood smells good. You can cook over it if you need to that day. Roast some marshmallows with the kids. That's a win. Just like with everything, there are drawbacks. So what are some of the drawbacks to burning your brush? Well, you may be in a burn ban. Here in Oklahoma, there's a lot of times where most of the summer we can't burn. If we don't get a bunch of spring rains and nothing's like really greening up, we get some pretty serious droughts here. So there's probably 5 to 6 months out of the year where we just can't even have a brush fire or anything like that because we're under a burn ban. Next issue you got to consider is if your fire gets too big, even if it's an approved burning day and you've got the right permits and stuff, if it gets out of control, it can damage not only the rest of your property, but other people's property. So being mindful of, wildfires and stuff getting out of control, no one wants to be the cause of that. So that could be a potential issue that you have to deal with. Next issue to consider is that, like I mentioned earlier, everything's gone. So if you want those trees as compostable material, or we'll talk about here in a little bit the benefits of chipped mulch in like a garden or walkway paths. If that's something you want, or and you don't want to have to buy later, burning it may not make sense. And one of the biggest issues is that if you have a big burn pile, you need some big equipment. I said earlier that you could also do a burn for pretty cheap, but that's probably small piles. If you're trying to burn a whole bunch, 15 or 20 trees worth in an afternoon or a day, sometimes you just need bigger equipment. And if you don't have access to that type of equipment, it's hard to get the pile pushed in on itself so that it can burn all the way down. Because a lot of times what happens is it'll be really hot in the middle and you'll burn the middle it'll basically make a donut. And if you don't have a way to push it in on the coals, that brush fire, you'll never get it all burned that way. So those are the pros and cons of burning. Let's move on to chipping. So like I mentioned before, if you need wood chips in your garden or animal pens or walkways or something, chipping up your own trees and saving those wood chips can be a great proposition for your homestead or farm or property or whatever. One of the main reasons we're doing this, and we'll talk about this more in just a little bit, is soil recovery. The soil out at our place is pretty old, used up pasture land, or I think it was farming land back in the day, but it's not very nutrient dense. It's really kind of sandy, kind of light brown. It's not the real super rich dark soil that you want for like a garden. So if you're trying to rejuvenate your soil and you want to turn all those wood chips back into the top layer for all the earthworms and microbes to eat up, well, you gotta chip it to have that happen, because once you burn it, it's gone. One of the other considerations to make is that if you're burning a lot of green trees or whatever, it's going to put off a lot of dark smoke. And if you don't want to put all that stuff into the atmosphere or in the air or on your property, chipping it, no smoke involved. There's a little bit of noise, but that just goes away once you turn the machine off. But the smoke, if you don't want to deal with that, because trust me, it'll put a whole bunch of smoke into the air. And one of the next pros to consider is that you can chip year round. Yeah, it may be hot, it may be cold, it may be rainy, it may be, really windy or whatever, but you don't have to worry about burn bans, you don't have to worry about how windy it is, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So like me, I have a day job, and I do a lot of my projects and land clearing on the weekends, I've got a certain amount of time that I have to work on it. And if it's not a good weather day and I can't burn, well, I can still chip it. So, you know your weather better than I know your weather, obviously. So that's just something else to consider. What are some of the potential issues with chipping? Well, number one, it's the cost, right? As the burning brush on your land is usually pretty affordable, unless it's, like I said, real big, you need equipment. The chipper we bought, this Harbor Freight model, it was like $600. We used a coupon because, Scout is thrifty, but if you're going to spend $600, or if you're going to rent a really big chipper for a few days, that price can get close to $1,000 pretty quick. Or you're paying a tree service to come do this. You're going to spend some money getting equipment, whether that's buying or renting, or renting a tree service, hiring a tree service. So it can get costly. Next is time. If you're doing this by yourself, you're going to be spending some time. We chipped wood for about 7 or 8 hours last weekend. We put a pretty big dent in one area, but oh my goodness, we did not get as much done as I thought. So it is going to be time consuming unless you're doing just a few downed branches at a time. Then it's not too bad. Also, one of the things to consider for the wood chips is if you are trying to make that soil or add it to your compost pile, it's going to take time to break down. I've read reports, depending on the species and your climate, 1 or 2 to even up to 5 years I've read. So if you're trying to get chips to make compost this year, well, you're going to have some patience, which is just another thing to consider, right? But probably, unless you're hiring it and you're just paying for it, if you're looking for your own homestead or land, plan to spend some effort. The learning curve on running one of these, I'm gonna say this is still a small chipper. This one we bought. The learning curve on that isn't too super steep, but there is definitely a learning curve. Knowing how to cut the branches up, knowing what's gonna get stuck in the feeder or not, how much you can actually get done in a day. All of that's gonna take some effort and some learning. But if you're like me and you're doing this as you get the pride out of doing it yourself, it's probably worth it. All right, so in conclusion, what did we choose to do? Well, I kind of already spilled the beans. We bought a chipper. Does that mean we're only ever going to use the chipper? No. But right now in this season, we're trying to stockpile materials for our future homestead. So what does that mean? It means I'm, picking up building materials from some friends that have some leftovers, But also, even in a project like this where I could have just cut everything down, piled it up, and burned it and been done with it, I'm planning ahead 2 to 3 years in the future. Where next year, if we have a huge pile of cedar wood chips and we build a garden, you know that's going to get used. If we get to the point this year where we can drag the land and kind of start reseeding, planting a deer food plot is what I'm talking about. But if we can incorporate spreading a layer of wood chips over it, maybe after we've seeded or something, and let all the worms break that down, all of that is going to improve the soil on my land immensely. It's going to be worth all the effort. But even with this size chipper, there is a lot of cutoffs that we're saving for firewood. Maybe it's not firewood just to get rid of it, but in the future, once it's dry and aged and seasoned, we'll use it in campfires and, once we move out there and stuff. So, but those are my reasons and my thoughts on chipping versus burning. What are yours? Let us know down in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought as well. And I will see you next time where we're working on something, right? Project Central, there's always a project going on. Oh, and the other thing I forgot to mention is if you want to see the review for the chipper we bought, I'm going to post it right here. Or right here, whichever way the thing works. So do what you always do. Take care of one another, and I'll see you next time. Bye.